a presentation.
Right.
So at the beginning, I have discussion questions rather than lecture, and people can jump into those if need be.
Okay,
Okay. Sounds
good to
great.
know. Thank you.
It wouldn't be good for me to do pure lecture because that kind of goes against what we're talking about. That would be kind of ironic.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our guest speaker webinars, co-organized by NDE World Language, NYLA, CLTA, SIG K-12, SIG group, huh? Okay, so this morning we have the great honor of having Dr. Christopher Jacobs going to talk with us about making your language assessments matter. And just a quick announcement that we are also going to have two upcoming great talks. They are going to be, they're going to be one of them is going to be presented by Ms. Chunmei Guan, and she's going to be talking about effective strategies for expanding world language programs, which is going to be on April 13th, 2024. And we also are going to have Ms. Alicia Shoemaker talking with us about designing aha moments in ICC experience on May 11th, 2024. I would like to invite you to register as soon as possible and join us on those great talks. Okay, so Dr. Jacob, the floor is all yours now.
All right, thank you for that introduction. I'm not sure I knew who you were talking about because I just call myself CJ. My coworkers call me CJ, my students call me CJ. I'm not sure if it'll be a great honor, but hopefully you'll have a few laughs and hopefully you'll learn something too. So I am going to try to share my screen here. If you see me looking a weird way, it's because I have a couple screens and sometimes I'm looking at one rather than the other. But do you see something that looks like a PowerPoint screen, or did I share the wrong screen? Okay,
Yes,
good.
we can see it. Yeah, thank you.
So maybe I looked at the chart wrong, but I had prepared a slightly different topic than what was on that introductory slide. This relates to assessment, but what I plan today is to talk about teaching grammar communicatively through the PACE method. As you might have imagined by PACE, P-A-C-E, written in capital letters, each of those letters stands for something, and we're going to see what that means soon. So I'm not sure that I've met most of you. Forgive me if we have met and I just unfortunately don't remember. But you might be wondering who I am. I currently teach French, Italian, Spanish, and classes for language teachers at the University of Nebraska at Kearney in rural central Nebraska. I'm not from there though. I grew up in Washington, D.C. and spent most of my grown-up life in Philadelphia. So I'm from the big city part of the East Coast of the US. And when I'm not doing things related to language teaching, language teacher ed, recruitment research, I really like to travel, to try new restaurants, to try new wines and cocktails, visit museums, and see good fashion and good design. And I like a lot more too, but didn't want to clutter up the slide too much. And as you see, I skipped that line accidentally, even though I'm teaching college now. I've also taught high school and I've taught elementary school too. So I know a little bit about that perspective. So remember that in the title, I said that we're going to talk about teaching communicatively. Teaching communicatively is kind of the opposite of lecture. Lecture is not communicative. Learning is active. We don't learn by osmosis. So I do have some slides where I'm going to tell you things, but there's also going to be a lot of interaction, a lot of reflection, a lot of participation, because that gives us other perspectives and helps us to actually take in and absorb the material. So the first thing I have for you is these discussion questions right here. And it looks like we have a number that I will probably want to divide you into groups rather than let everyone all be together. I'm copying the questions into the chat, just did that. I'm going to divide you into two groups, and I'm going to give you somewhere between 5 and 7 minutes to answer these 4 bulleted questions. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes, good.
All right. And you might see me check in on your groups. You just might. I'm making the groups right now, and I'm going to make them randomly. But no. Okay, I'm opening the discussion rooms. My Zoom's not in English, so sometimes I don't know what these things are called in English. I should have sent you an invitation to a really great party that you know you want to join.
It's fine.
You didn't get one.
I didn't. It seems that they're all in the breakout rooms, huh?
Yeah. Maybe I accidentally checked some box that the co-host doesn't get assigned to a room.
No, that's fine. But then I think we have Annie
Maybe
Lu
she's
here.
driving or something.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Those are great questions. Oh, we have one more
Tried to
coming.
put a little thought into them. Did I see someone new appear? I am going to put them in a group.
Mhm.
And I'm going to put this person in a group. Please accept the invitation. We'll talk through these questions until about 10:15 or just past Central US time. Here's another. I'll put this person in a group, maybe group 2. You should have all got an invitation to a fabulous party where you're going to talk about the goals of language learning, what you focus on in class, and what you do about grammar.
Oh, that's it.
So tell me, and anyone else I may not have put in a room. What
Okay,
is the goal of language learning?
that's nice. I'll definitely remind if I see anybody coming in.
Okay, thank you.
I think
I'm
we have a
trying
good,
to look.
yeah, I think we have a good group right now.
They seem to be relatively balanced. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's balance as they can be with that number.
Nice.
Do other people who do these talks usually do groups, or like what kind of format do people usually use?
Well, I didn't see them using breakout rooms very often, but definitely some of them did. So I feel like you can do it any way you want, and this is a really interactive way. I like it actually. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
what do other people do? Do they just talk for the hour, or
They
what kind
usually
of
talk
format?
through the hour, and then for the rest, like 15 to 30 minutes, it will be questions and answers. So people would,
Okay.
yeah.
And what was the last topic that you had someone present on?
I think last one, I didn't come to the last one in particular. Let me check.
I'm sorry, that wasn't a trap. I can probably check too.
No, that's
Was
fine.
March 20th leveraging student opportunities and identifying HAL in world language?
I think it is.
I actually don't know what HAL is. Do you know what HAL is?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. I feel better. Maybe the flyer probably says.
Ooh.
Okay. Okay, someone who is an HAL specialist, but what is it? Okay, it tells you a little later. Uncover the potential within high ability learners in the realm of world language education as the presenters share practical guidelines and procedures for school districts. There we
Mhm.
go. I guess I don't know because I was never high ability. So that's probably why I don't know what HAL are.
No, me either. That's why I don't know. I don't know
Exactly.
about it either.
We don't have to know if it never applied, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you know Crystal? Do you work at NDE also?
No, I also was a doctorate student with Dr. Ellie Moeller, and so that's how I got uh to know Crystal. Because we
Ah,
were
okay.
yeah, we were in the same PhD program. And
At the same
then
time, obviously.
obviously, yes.
Yeah.
And then I came to Colorado to teach. And then I'm moving to North Carolina this summer, so it's going to be a lot of
That's a
trouble.
big move.
Yeah,
Why are
it
you
is.
moving so far?
We are mo Did you say where or why?
Why? Why are you
Why?
moving so far away?
I'm moving for a new job in a university near Charlotte. So we're moving to Charlotte.
Oh, congrats. And are
Thank
you
you.
teaching at a university in Colorado or are you teaching
No,
at a
I
high
was not.
school?
I was teaching at K-12 earlier. So I have been teaching at a K-12 private school uh right now. And then I'm moving to higher ed this
Oh,
summer.
nice.
Yeah.
What made you decide to change from K-12 private school to higher ed?
I don't know. I feel like um because remember I've been in the education department. My PhD program was in the education department. And
Sure.
then um I've I've always wanted to go to higher ed. But I know the K-12 experience is is precious if you want to work in the education department in the university. Because
Definitely.
they do need their professors to know the background knowledge, to have the background knowledge in K-12 teaching and administration, all different kinds of things. So that's why I came to K-12 first. And now
Ah,
I'm ready
okay.
to get that experience that I didn't have in the United States. And then, so now I'm ready to move on, go
Ah, I
back to higher.
gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It looks like I kicked everyone out of the discussion rooms, not because they were being bad, but because I wanted to talk through some of these things together and then go on to the next part. All right. So
Awesome.
tell me, whoever it might be, what is the goal of language learning and why is that the goal?
We had two different answer. First was communication, which is that's a part of learning goal of our in the classroom, and then the second one is actually like keep the interest and the learning, so that's something we also think about, make the students like language, like make them become kind of lifelong learner, or like a don't don't lose the interest, continue learning certain thing. That's something we also talk about.
So you want them to learn how to communicate in the target language, the language they're learning. And in order for that to happen, you want to keep your students motivated so they actually come to class, do their work, and make an effort and in the language learning process. Is that, did I understand right?
Yeah, that's true. It's not, but it's not. I feel it's not just in class, but it's also in the future. So it's not just for the class itself at that moment, but like when they leave the classroom, they don't hate the language. They actually will continue learning
Ah,
by
gotcha. So like they graduate high school, they graduate college, and you want them to still continue learning the language you're teaching. You want to inspire them, to motivate them to do that.
yeah.
You want
I
to
see.
make
Nice.
your students fall in love with language because you only have them for such a short amount of time. You have to inspire that curiosity and to make them want to keep learning. after they leave your classroom.
And how does one do that? How does one inspire that curiosity and make them want to keep learning? I'm trying to figure out how to do that because I don't think my students like my class.
Well, it's a mixture of humor and fun and focusing more on communicating rather than the grammar, which I know is the point of this presentation. I'm sorry.
No, but this is communicative grammar.
Okay,
Is that what you mean? This is not traditional grammar.
right, yes.
What we're talking about today, I've never seen done as a student in language classes when I was learning languages myself. I've only seen it since I started taking teaching methods classes. So anyway, we want to inspire students to not only care about class, do well in class, but keep learning language once they get out of the classroom and again, get out of school. And we care more if they can communicate, if they can make meaning, than if they have a perfect knowledge of grammar. Are we all in agreement on that? We don't have to be. I'm just saying, are there any other ideas? All right, pardon?
I'm sorry, I just don't want to use too much of your time because I want to hear more from you, but I want to mention about learning Chinese is so different from the Western language because the Chinese character doesn't tell you the sound. And if you keep teaching them the communication, teaching them the speaking, they don't identify that character and they couldn't. Over time, I heard the teacher say they teach the student for 8 years and change a different teacher. That the second teacher find out the student are illiterate. 8 years of learning still don't know how to write, how to identify the characters. So if you don't know how to see, to understand a character, how are you gonna read them? How are you gonna understand them? So you only know communicative speaking. Okay, memorize a certain amount of the communicative speaking, but you don't identify the character, it's very difficult. So
That's a good point.
how can we teach them communicative and also let them know or don't hate the character or hate to write words. So it's very hard, very hard.
I don't speak or teach Chinese, but the first idea that comes to my mind would be maybe using some sort of comprehensible input stories where they just see a few new characters beyond what they've already seen in each story, and where they have to try to induce the character's meaning by the context. I feel like that would be probably the most communicative way to teach characters, though. I mean, Chinese is so different from anything I know or teach. I guess there's no problem.
But by the time, I'm sorry to I'm sorry to
go ahead. I don't know anything about teaching Chinese. I trust you on this.
I'm not an expert, but I listen to the lecture from the retired Beijing University professor say, the character is so important that if we want to focus on the character for them to remember to write, they hate it. Western students, they only communicative. They don't like to just keep learning the character. That is gonna be bored to them because by then they understand the character, then you're gonna teach them communicative. That will be spend a lot of time on the character identification, memorize, and all that. And then they grow into bored. They grow into not like it's dry. But then you want to teach them communicative too, but then the time is not allow you to do all that.
That is tricky. I understand the problem. I can't claim to have a solution for a language that's so different from what I know. I guess we just have to still keep in mind that the goal is communication and figure out how to make the students not end up illiterate, assuming that the students care that they're illiterate. I mean, I can imagine people wanting to learn Chinese just to speak it and not caring if they could read or write. Like, honestly, that would probably be me. if I had decided to learn Chinese. That I would just be like, the characters are so hard, they're so different, it's so much memorization. I'm just going to learn to speak and listen. I don't care if I can read and write. So I guess it kind of depends on student goals too, no?
But if you say only that then this way is not fit for the ACTFL goal, because they want you to be able to read and write and listen, and that four skills you cannot reach because you will just only talk a very simple conversation and simple grammar, simple everything, and you are not progress in a very big amount and a complicated one, because for that you need to identify or know the character, or else you can't.
Yeah, Lin Lao Shi, I think that's a great question. I think I'm a Chinese teacher too. I feel like sometimes it's really hard and to find the balance between how we teach the communicative skills to the students, and also try to help enhance their reading and writing skills, especially when it concerns the Chinese characters, right? And actually, at the end of this presentation, we have about 15 to 30 minutes for a great discussion among all our
So
teachers.
that's why I say I don't want to occupy too much of
No worries. I would love to
Yeah.
talk about that with you later
Thank you.
on that. Yeah, because I'm very interested in that topic too. Thank you for your great question.
Thank you.
I just take questions as they come, so don't worry, you haven't bothered me at all. So let's go on to the next part here. So what is the problem that we're looking at? As we've alluded to, most students study languages, whether it's Chinese, French, Spanish, Arabic, anything else, to communicate. Mostly spoken communication, but different students have different goals. And there's a lot of research on practice or practice theory that says that you can't learn to do something without actually doing that something. So if the goal is to communicate, to speak a second or foreign language, you need to practice speaking that language, which means that we should do speaking activities in class that resemble what students would find in target language context outside of the language classroom. And then after that, there is a lot of other research that shows that even though grammar shouldn't be the focus of language teaching and learning, that at the same time, students having some awareness of grammar can help them feel more confident in their communication, communicate more accurately, and make meaning more effectively. So grammar has a place, but most current research agrees that grammar should not be the focus of most language classes. So if we need to speak to learn how to speak, and if we have research that shows that some awareness of grammar can actually help students communicate, that suggests that we need a method of teaching grammar that is communicative, that keeps the focus on making meaning. Because otherwise, if we focused on grammar traditionally, learners won't have that speaking practice, that communicative practice. And on the other hand, if we say took a pure comprehensible input approach where there's absolutely no grammar, the learners could maybe sometimes struggle to make meaning because of really, really low grammatical accuracy. You don't have to have perfect grammar, but your grammar has to at least be good enough that you can be understood, right? So obviously there's other options out there, but what I propose, and I didn't come up with it myself because I was a baby when this came out, is the PACE model, PACE. And the people who came up with it, who worked in teacher ed and specifically French teacher ed, there's nothing specifically French about this model. It applies to every language or nearly every language. What they said is that this is a story-based approach to teaching of grammar in a standards-based language classroom. A standards-based language classroom is essentially ACTFL lingo for saying a communicative or proficiency-based language classroom rather than a grammar-based language classroom. And this PACE method emphasizes the teaching of grammar in context through stories as that story-based approach definition says originally, but this PACE method has been applied to many other kinds of text, written and spoken text. And right now, it's really in style, if you can say that about a teaching method, to apply it to authentic or non-learner centered text, spoken or written, which are those made by fluent target language speakers for fluent target language speakers. And then we get this commutative functional grammar and also all the benefits, which is not the topic of this session, of authentic or non-learner centered materials, that students see real language and they also get to see culture in context, but that's not the topic of today's session. And this PACE method keeps the focus on meaning and communication, yet it invites students to reflect on grammar in context, and it invites them to come up with the grammar rules based on contextualized examples, rather than being told, these are the rules, memorize them, and then do a bunch of drills as you might see in a traditional grammar-focused language classroom, like a lot of the language classes I took as a student. And then after this grammar reflection in context, of course, the students apply their commutative skills and their grammar skills to commutative tasks that naturally use both the grammar and the content in context. I'm using this word context a lot because it's very important. Pardon? So, I think I alluded to this, that PACE was originally conceived as a story-based method related to a specific flavor of comprehensible input teaching called TPRS, and that stands for Total Physical Response Story Time, which is reading a simple story that is very much adapted to the vocab, the content, the overall language level of the students, and having the students react on it, often through movements. But as I said, the use of PACE has been much expanded, and that includes to authentic or non-learner centered text. And I am not against TPRS. I think it can be useful, especially in lower language levels and with younger students too. But I definitely prefer, at least for high schoolers, for college students and people older than that, a task-based teaching through authentic text. But anyway, it can be used in a lot of ways. PACE can be used in a lot of ways. And as you might imagine, steps can be added and subtracted as necessary, while still keeping the spirit of the PACE method, even if you don't follow the manual step by step, adapted to your needs. So what are the components of this PACE method? Each of the four letters, PACE, stands for something, and each of these somethings is a stage in the PACE process. So the P stands for presentation. I'm not talking about a presentation like a lecture. I'm talking about an introduction to not the grammar, at least not directly, but the content that we are treating in this lesson. And in this presentation stage, the students complete one or more meaning-focused activities that are based on some sort of text, preferably an authentic text. And I just had something I wanted to say that slipped out of mind. Oh, yes. In task-based teaching, you often hear about a pre-task that you do to get students ready for a task, for a commutative activity with a non-linguistic objective, and then the task itself, which is that activity, and a post-task, which is some reflection on the task or the main activity itself. So yeah, you could have and probably should have, a pre-task, task, post-task sequence within this presentation phase. And then after you've done however many communicative activities you want to do as part of your presentation phase, I'll show you concrete examples of how this could work in a real lesson. You go to the attention stage. A stands for attention. And in this stage, you draw student focus to the target form or forms. We would generally recommend sticking with just one grammar form to not lead to overload, but you can sometimes do 2 or 3 if and only if the grammar forms are very, very closely connected. Like, for example, if you want the students to compare present tense and past tense, or if you're dealing with Latin languages, if you want them to compare the past tense that describes a sequence of events and the past tense that describes background information or is used to give descriptions. Those are both two forms, but they're very closely related. And it's still one concept of the contrast between these two forms. And to call attention to the forms or the form, you can highlight or underline in the text, or if the students are there, you can even have the students go find it. Like say something like, go back over the text and underline all past tense verbs or something like that. And then in the co-construction phase, you build on the attention phase and you have the students try to come up with the grammar rules. Like imagine we already have the past tense verbs highlighted. You would then in the co-construction phase ask the students, what do you notice about these highlighted verbs? And what do you think the rules are that govern the formation of the past tense in whatever the target language might be? And you might do this, you wouldn't necessarily have to, in a think, pair, share model that maybe give the students a minute or two to think about individually, then give them a couple minutes to share with a partner, and you as the teacher would circulate through the classroom to make sure they were on task, see if they had any questions. And then you would go over what the student groups came up with as a full class. And the teacher would definitely intervene if the students are way off base, but to the extent possible, the teacher would try to redirect the students and prompt the students rather than giving the rule. But yes, of course, at the end, the teacher would make sure that the students would have some sort of level appropriate rule. Doesn't have to be the full truth, but at least a level appropriate rule that explains the grammar forms. And then after the two grammar related phases, you go on to the extension phase, which is a lot like the presentation phase, except you've already reflected on the grammar and hopefully have a little bit more awareness of it and are paying more attention to how you apply the grammar through another sequence of commutative tasks. Does that make sense? So the PACE method has 4 components: presentation, which is meaning focused activities; attention, drawing student focus to target grammar form or closely related grammar forms; C for co-construction, guiding the students in coming up with their own grammar rules, and of course, redirecting them if they're not good grammar rules; and E for extension, applying what you've learned, both in terms of communicative content and grammar, to more commutative tasks that are extension tasks, usually more involved tasks than the task in the PE presentation phase. So now we're going to see what this could look like in a real lesson. And I just took some screenshots of a recent lesson that I did in 3rd semester French. Don't worry if you do not speak French, not a requirement at all for this session. I'm going to tell you the highlights of it without translating every word in my document. So in the screenshot you see on the right of a presentation phase of a lesson on the French language in North America, like US and Canada, where we answered questions like, who are these French-speaking communities? What are their histories? How do they use French? What do they feel about their identities as French speakers? This is how we started in the presentation phase. And the text that I used here was a blog post on a French-speaking Canadian influencer, YouTuber and Instagrammer and TikToker, all that, who grew up in a French-speaking family in an English-speaking part of Canada. And in my pre-task of the presentation phase, based on the blog post on the influencer, who's very much a French language activist in English Canada, you could do some vocab activities, or you could just jump more to communicative activities, depends on the situation. And all that I said here is I'm going to read in English, not in French. This week's courses or classes are going to be based on a video from the French-speaking Canadian YouTuber Appelez-moi Phil. Have a look at his Instagram, and I gave it a link. What does this tell you about Phil? How would you describe him? And what do you think of him? And they're hopefully going to see in this Instagram that he's a French speaker because most of his posts are in French. And based on what his posts are, they're going to see that he is an activist for the keeping the French language alive in the parts of Canada where it's not dominant, and also for helping French speakers in non-French dominant parts of Canada get access to services in French, which is one of the country's two official languages. So that was the pre-task of my presentation phase. And then the task, the main event of the presentation phase, was reading the article, which I copied below on the right, the blog post rather, and answering a couple of questions. Who is Phil? How would you describe his childhood? He talks about his learning and using and not using French. And also as a question, what is Phil's biggest passion? Where does this passion come from? So notice that these are meaning-focused questions. And then my post-task of this presentation phase is reaction. Do you relate to Phil, to his story? Why or why not? Again, everything here is focused on meaning. I had a pre-task where I got students thinking about what they're going to read in my authentic text. Then I had a couple of big picture, meaning-focused reading comprehension questions on the authentic text. And then after that, I had a little reflection extension activity, still focusing on meaning. And on the left, you have some other ideas of things that you could do in this phase. You can really do anything as long as it focuses on meaning and not grammar. So what about the attention phase? This on the right here is the same blog post, just bigger. I didn't mention any grammar form when I told you the lesson goals. That was not forgetting, that was intentional. I never put grammar lingo in my lesson goals, but I think I did say something about a lesson goal on how these French-speaking US and Canadian communities got to be. That implies we're talking about the past, right? So the grammar forms that I chose to consider here were two different past tenses, one that's used for sequential events and another that is used to describe background rather than sequential events. And I highlighted one of those tenses and I underlined the other without telling the students anything more than that. And hopefully now they're like, huh, there's stuff underlined. There is stuff highlighted. And then after that, we have the students try to come up with their own rules of how these grammar tenses are formed and how they're used. But I cared more about how they're used for this lesson because the students had already done units in each of these individual grammar tenses. And of course, we used PACE there too. And we also asked about how's this tense formed and what do you think this tense does? But actually, preferably the what do you think it does before the form thing. So anyway, what did I ask them in the co-construction phase for this particular lesson? It says here, grammar and context. Answer the following questions in the language you prefer. So they don't have to use French, though it's surely, obviously, always encouraged. Answer these questions based on the previous text. Work with a classmate. And I have three questions. Number one, have a look at the highlighted verbs and words, excuse me, verbs, yes. And I highlighted the word highlighted so they'd understand that. What do you notice about these highlighted verbs? And then number two, look back at the underlined verbs. And I underlined the word underlined, so they would hopefully be a little bit clearer. What do you notice about these underlined verbs? And the third and final question in this stage, what is the difference between the highlighted and underlined verbs? And I left that open to allow them to talk about both functional differences and formal differences. But as I said, since they've already done separate lessons on the individual verb tenses, I care more about the function of the two tenses in comparison here than I do about the verb forms, the verb endings. All right. So then after that, I have an extension activity. My extension activity here is pretty simple. It is just a little discussion, one of the easiest extensions you can do, but when speaking is the goal, it's honestly a really great extension, in my opinion. And I asked, have you had similar experiences to Phil? That's the influencer that the blog post was about. Let's talk about them. Describe what happened and what the context was. The what happened and the what the context was just naturally should elicit the two different verb tenses that we looked at up here and up here. But notice that I never named the verb tenses. I kept the focus on function, on communication, and just set up a natural context that these verb tenses would hopefully come out. So that's just one example. I actually did a couple more pace sequences in the same lesson because there's a lot of research to show that repeated practice, at least to a point, is really helpful in learning topics. And also because this past tense contrast is very, very challenging for learners of French who do not speak another Latin language. If they're Spanish speakers, Italian speakers, Portuguese speakers, super easy. But if they're monolingual English speakers or speak another non-Latin language, very hard concept to acquire. So you saw here, hopefully, that in my sloppy computer handwriting, I put the letters PACE on here to identify the stages. And this stage is based on a different section of the same blog post on influencer Phil's experiences with French and English and promoting French. And here in my presentation stage, I said, let's read a second excerpt from the same article. It only consists of 2 small paragraphs. Answer the 3 questions according to a part of the article. Number 1, what is linguistic insecurity? Number 2, how has Phil experienced linguistic insecurity? And number 3, what happened as a result of Phil's linguistic insecurity? Notice that these are all meaning-focused questions. And since the students had already done some things with this same article, for better or for worse, I decided to semi-streamline my P phase as compared to the last pace sequence because otherwise it would have maybe been redundant. And then in the A, I again underlined one verb tense and I highlighted the other. And no, I didn't change which tense was highlighted and which tense was underlined over the previous excerpt. I kept it the same. And in the C co-construction section here, I asked them the exact same questions as before, not because I was lazy, totally purposeful, to get them thinking yet again about how these tenses are used with different contextualized examples. And again, the questions are, go back over the the highlighted verbs. What do you notice about them? Go back over the underlined verbs. What do you notice about them? What is the difference between the highlighted and underlined verbs? And then in the E extension phase, I have a couple more discussion questions to be done in a think, pair, share model. Again, these focus on meaning. This isn't the last pace sequence. I have one more, I think. I asked, have you ever experienced linguistic insecurity? In what context did you experience it? How did you react? Why did you react this way? And number 2 out of 2, have you ever felt insecure for another reason other than linguistic insecurity? In what context? How did you react? Why did you react this way? And these discussion questions, like the ones from the previous pace sequence in the same lesson, are designed to naturally communicatively elicit the 2 verb tenses, the 2 past tenses, without making any direct reference to them. Communicative grammar with the focus on communication. And then here is my third and last PACE sequence from this lesson. Though in this particular level of French, I use PACE almost every day for a different topic. So this section here is called French in the US, ? The French speakers of Louisiana, New England, and other places. And in the first part of my multi-step P presentation phase, I have a warm-up that says, what do you know about the French language in the US? Let's talk about it. And then after that, a little buildup of that, look at the following maps. These maps show the most used non-English languages in each state. One is exactly that, and the other shows the most used language besides English and Spanish. And that's the one that has more colors, as you can imagine, since Spanish is so common in so many parts of the US. But in most of the New England states, the far Northeast, and in Louisiana, French beats Spanish. And in some of these states by a significant margin as the most spoken non-English language. So anyway, talking about French in the US after having talked about French in Canada with the things about Phil. And here, my authentic text that I'm building up to, well, I guess the maps are, but they're not linguistically complex enough for a PACE sequence. But the authentic text that I'm building up to is a video from the same Canadian influencer, Phil, about a couple of different French-speaking communities in the US. So after the maps in this P2, that's just something arbitrary, just the way I decided to divide the presentation phase. We have some listening comprehension questions on the video about these French-speaking communities in the US, and then a reaction on what they've learned. What did you learn from this video? How would you sum up the video? Big picture questions after the more specific, but not too specific questions. And honestly, what came before wasn't really questions. I just listed the French-speaking communities that the video talked about and asked the students to write what they thought was important about them, like where they are in the US, how big they are, how the communities got there, those kind of things, whatever they thought was important. So then we move on to the attention and co-construction phases, which use this material on the right. And what I did here was I transcribed, kind of a pain, honestly, but worth it for a PACE sequence, 3 small sections of the video. Each of these sections is only a paragraph, and we do an A, attention, and C, co-construction with each of these paragraphs. Notice that I didn't highlight or underline anything. This time, I asked the students to do that. And now the students have the declarative grammar knowledge, the metalinguistic knowledge of these 2 past tenses in comparison, that I can say, go underline past tense 1 with giving them the name of that tense, and go highlight past tense 2 while giving them the name of that tense. And then yet again, I ask, what do you notice about these verb tenses? How do you make them? And more importantly, what do they do? Both individually and in comparison to each other. And we did exactly the same thing with each of these 3 little paragraphs that I transcribed from the video. So after that, we have, I'll call it a 2-part extension, because one is the extension of just the little French in the US sequence, and the other is the extension project of the whole unit. So a bigger extension. But the little extension on what we did with the French in the US is a little discussion on this. Do you know anything, and any similar situations to what we looked at in the previous section? And these are situations of French-speaking communities in the US. So this could elicit responses regarding other French-speaking communities in the US, both ones who've been here for generations and recent immigrant ones that weren't talked about in the video. This could also possibly elicit discussion on the experiences of other immigrant communities in the US or who knows where else who speak languages other than the dominant language. Just getting the students to think about the important concepts, the content concepts, not grammar concepts, while hopefully also applying the two past tenses that we compared and contrasted in telling stories. And then the extension task for the whole sequence, for the whole weekly unit, is make an infographic on a French-speaking community in the US that the video did not talk about. Tell us a little bit about the history of this community. The community can be a long-established or a new community. Post your infographic on your class Instagram. That's a topic for a different workshop, but in this class and a lot of my basic and intermediate level language classes, we use class-only private Instagram accounts to do speaking, reading, and writing in natural, real-world ways. And they have Instagram topics generally every week, with the project itself due Thursday nights, and comments on classmates' projects due Sunday nights for an engagement grade. So this is how I have recently done PACE, multiple PACEs in context. And this is all the lecture style presentation I have for right now, but I do have some discussion questions, which hopefully you see here, that I'm hoping we can talk about. And since we have, I think, 35 minutes, we do have time, I think, to do these first in discussion rooms, or I think they're called breakout rooms in English, right? And then talk about these questions all together. Does that sound like a plan? So basically, this is about how you've applied PACE and how you could apply PACE, whether or not you already have applied it. So I'm going to create the breakout rooms, and let's say I'm going to give you somewhere in the range of 5 to 7 minutes like the last time, okay? So I'm making the breakout rooms. I'm going to make new ones this time because we have some new people, and it's also nice to get new perspectives. And okay, it's relatively balanced. Actually, no, looks like there's some duplicate logins. I'll do one less group. All right, here we go, 5 to 7 minutes. Accept the invitation to the party. And we'll discuss all together sometime between 11 and 11:05 Central US time. Please don't forget to accept the invitation to the breakout rooms. We learn this stuff by talking about it, not through lecture. Lecture's not communicative.
Thank you. I think that was really great sharing.
You're welcome. I'm glad you liked it. I don't really like presenting or lecturing, not because I'm shy, but because it's not my teaching style. It feels hypocritical.
That's right.
I
don't
hope- Pardon?
I don't particularly like lecturing either, so
Was I only mildly boring, or did I get really boring?
no, you are not even mildly boring. So you are not boring at all.
Oh, good. I guess I need to try harder to at least get a little boring, because they say that lectures have to be boring, right? But honestly, I feel like a big factor is the length of the lecture. Like a 20-minute presentation, okay. A hour, hour and a half, 2 hour, 3 hour class where the professor just talks, not okay.
I know that'll be too long.
That is way too long. I had way too many classes like that as a student, including some that were supposed to be language learning classes, and I don't know how we were supposed to learn much when the professor just talked at us and we didn't really do anything with the material.
Where did you go to graduate school?
I went to Temple University in Philadelphia for my last part of graduate school. And for my
Wow.
master's in French teaching, I went to Middlebury College in Vermont.
Well, that's a great one,
I thought
right?
so.
Yeah, that's very famous.
I was not necessarily looking for famous, though that can't hurt. I went because I was already working as a teacher. I didn't want to quit my job, and I wanted a summer only master's degree for teachers. So that's what I found. And in 4, I think either 6 or 7 week summer sessions at their Vermont campus, where we had to speak all French all the time with extremely limited exceptions, I got a master's degree in French teaching, and I think I learned some French too.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you grow
So-
up speaking French or you just learned it later?
No, it's a total foreign language for me. My parents speak nothing but English and grew up speaking nothing but English. I
Wow,
studied
and now
French in
you
8th grade.
teach French, Spanish, and Italian?
Yes, but they're also similar. It's not like teaching French, Arabic, and Chinese. That
That's
would be a
true.
lot more impressive.
That's true. I'm learning Spanish right now. I just feel like the conjugation's killing me right now.
Conjugation's not great, but what did we say earlier? The most important thing is getting your point across. People
That's
will
true.
understand you most of the time when the conjugation isn't quite right.
Yeah, I know. That's what people told me. I don't have to remember all those verb forms.
No, and some of those forms aren't very frequent in real life conversation.
That's true. Communication is the most important purpose, huh? Here.
Of course. Well, for most people, I guess some people learn languages for scholarly purposes, that they want to study a certain culture and just need to read that language, but that's not most language learners.
That's true.
Why did you decide to start Spanish?
I don't know. I just probably because the majority of my colleagues in the world language department speak Spanish.
Ah,
And also I have a lot of Spanish speaking students in my
really?
Mandarin in my Chinese class. Yeah. So I do want to build that level of connection and rapport with students and also understanding. So so that's why I started learning Spanish, and it's also one of the most popular foreign languages right now in the US. So I'm
That's
trying
true.
to, so I'm trying to get into that. I actually also learned French for 2 years when I was an English
Really?
major in China, but I forgot all of
Really?
them though.
I was just gonna ask what your French was like now, but you said you've
No, I
forgotten
said
it.
I forgot all of them. That was a while ago. But anyway, I just feel like I don't know, Spanish, I feel like conjugations in Spanish is a lot harder than in French than that in French.
I
Too.
think the Spanish conjugation is harder when you're speaking, but less hard when you're writing compared to French. And I say that because a lot of French verb forms sound the same, even though
Mhm.
they're not spelled the same. But in Spanish, there's very few, if any, verb forms that sound the same. They sound different and are spelled different.
That's true. That's true. But it's
Like,
just hard for me to remember all those different tenses.
you don't
And
need to.
uh
Some of them aren't widely used.
but then that's how I learned it. I took it in Colorado Mountain College, and then I took it up to Spanish 4. So
Oh,
we
wow.
learn a lot of grammar in class, and we learn all those tenses. So I don't know. I just learned it that way. So I felt like I had to know them, and I
No.
didn't know them, and I feel like I will never know them. It's just too many for me to remember.
You will know them by hearing them, reading them, and using them in communicative context. And maybe studying a little on the side, but just studying and doing conjugation drills, no, you're not going to learn them that way. There's too much to memorize. And even if you learned them in the sense that you could conjugate them, you would. But anyway, it looks like those who are going to be here probably are here. So
Mhm.
let's talk a little bit about these questions that you've hopefully talked about in your breakout rooms. How have you all applied PACE in your language classes?
I have heard it, but I did not like actually applied it yet. Something like what I heard it before is like make a story like based on the grammar structure you actually need to talk like make a story like oh, let's talk about after school dismissed from school you go home and what do you do? So we can practice 把字句 like 把门打开。把冰箱打开，把水拿出来 which is like how you deal with some object, right? So you can contextualize that. But the different thing I feel like maybe I will do is I feel the sequence of the words or the word order is very important to the grammar structure, especially for us. So I
Any
will,
language.
I will say like maybe in the extended parts, adding some, I know this is kind of let student to find out or summarize the grammar structure by themselves or the pattern for themselves. But I think maybe in the E, which is the extension part, maybe as teacher, we should point out or like clearly that's supposed to be the right structure. It's not just to give the answer. I feel that's more about like checking your understanding. Is your summarized point is the same as what I want to let you know. So that's part I feel like maybe we should let them have that.
Thank you. PACE does
Okay.
that. We just have the students
What-
come up with the rules first, and then the teacher confirms or denies the rules. I don't speak Chinese, but at least for the languages I teach, I don't personally think it's important necessarily that the students get my rule, so
Mm.
long as they come up with a rule that's mostly true, or that's at least as true as it needs to be for that level of language learning.
Okay.
There could be
Yeah.
multiple possible rules, or they could
Okay.
say the same thing in just very different words, but in a way that makes more sense to them than my explanation. So if what they say is true and it's going to get them in the right place, I'm like, good job, you got it.
Okay. Yeah, for me, maybe that's a little bit a different understanding. Because for us, I do want they can communicate, like use the correct way or at least the more clear way to communicate. So if there's some ambiguity during the communication, the rule is not the very clear expression, I will like them to know what will be the better way or will be the way to avoid those kind of like misunderstandings. So that's
I agree. If
yeah.
it's something they couldn't easily figure out themselves and something that was really important, I agree. Again, I don't speak Chinese, and
Mm.
it would be hard to find a language, or at least a major world language, that is more different from French than Chinese is.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Has anyone else used PACE or some variant of it in language teaching? In Chinese and English and French and Arabic and any language?
I've used a little bit of it with my students, maybe not as organized as much with the C and the E. I focus a lot on the E and the A. Usually when I'm introducing a new concept, I try to present it implicitly, either through a reading activity or a listening activity where we discuss, what did you hear? What's going on in the context here before we look at those specific forms.
So that's a variation of PACE, and it accomplishes pretty much the same goal, since one of the major goals of PACE is to do inductive grammar, where the students have to figure out rules with guidance from the teacher as necessary. And do you use text that you write or comprehensive input text that you find somewhere, or do you use authentic text made by and for fluent speakers, or what do you use for the text that you have them think about grammar off of?
Well, with my level ones, I try to create some that like they'll either focus on like my personal like story or situation. Like I'm just finishing up a family unit with my Spanish ones. So I talked a lot about my family
Sure.
and, something that is more concrete for them to kind of grasp. In higher levels, I try to include more authentic texts and more, you know, things that can have like a cultural component to it. But I do try to use like the comprehensible input throughout all the levels.
Mm-hmm.
But comprehensible input is different in a basic level versus an intermediate or advanced because students have a different level of language, different proficiency. So what's comprehensible at the advanced level is a lot more complex than what's comprehensible at the basic level, no?
Very true. Very true.
And I think that it's perfectly fair to use, I'll call them fabricated text or even fake text at the basic level. I think in an ideal world, this is just me personally, many people don't agree, it would be best even at the basic level to still use carefully chosen, authentic text made by and for fluent speakers. But sometimes it's really hard to find what you're looking for. Like you can easily find something on family, like maybe like a trailer or a part of a first episode of a TV show or a movie that has a family in it, or or a video on some celebrities or political leaders' family, or something like that. But these videos might not be as comprehensible as we'd hope, though I like to sometimes think that we can adapt the task rather than the text. And even if we did that, these videos might not show the grammar form that we want to show. Like if we're looking for possessive adjectives like my mom, your mom, her mom, it might not show that, even if it has the family vocab. So I think, though, in my opinion, not ideal. It is perfectly okay and probably sometimes necessary to use fabricated text, especially in the lower levels. But when you can, authentic text.
TJ,
Yeah.
when you're talking about the fabricated text, I'm thinking about I think it's the same in Chinese that sometimes it's hard to find exactly the kind of material that you want to use to teach that kind of
Sure.
grammar in your class. And I feel like now with AI, especially ChatGPT, I think it's easier for us to create that fabricated text, right?
Yes.
With
Yes.
the target, a grammar in there. So we can just say, can you please help create a paragraph that has this grammar in it in Chinese or in Spanish or French, and then it will pop up. So I feel like those AI tools sometimes can be very helpful in creating those
Oh yeah.
texts, fabricated text. Yeah.
Yes.
It's still fabricated or fake because of the purpose that it was not made for fluent speakers by fluent speakers. But I bet, I haven't tried personally, those texts come out a little bit more authentic, a little more interesting than a fabricated text that we write by hand, or maybe not literally by hand, but without AI.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree, which is because we are teaching certain structure or the grammar, we must use that. So teacher made things based on authentic maybe will be the better choice for us. Sorry, some teacher may join the webinar later, so they want to
Quite
know
okay.
what the PACE, which the PACE, what's each letter stand for? Could you
Yeah.
repeat that part?
PACE is a communicative grammar teaching method, a method that has students figure out grammar rules based on examples and context, ideally through authentic text made by and for fluent speakers. PACE has 4 stages. Each of the 4 letters stands for something. P stands for presentation. In the presentation stage, we do meaning-focused activities based on the text. And in a perfect lesson, if such a thing exists, you might do a pre-task, task, post-task, possibly some or all those with multiple steps as you like. And then in the A or attention stage, you call, as the teacher, a student attention, student focus to a desired target grammar form. And you can do this with vocab too. And in some cases, you might highlight or underline the form if you don't think they can find it, or at least if you don't think they can find it without you giving away the rules, which is a later part. Also, if they can find the target form on their own, you might have them find it and not highlight anything or underline anything yourself. You might tell them, go find all the past tense verbs. I know that Chinese doesn't have verb tenses, but at least not in the same way as Western languages, but many languages do have those. And I'm sure you could do something similar, though not for that topic, in Chinese. And then in the C or co-construction phase, the students work together. This comes from sociocultural theory, which advocates for a lot of peer interaction. The students work together to come up with the grammar rules based on what you, as the teacher, already called their attention to. And you might use a think, pair, share model here, where you give the students a minute or two to think on their own, then pair them up or put them in a small group, and then talk about it all together as a class after that. And in my understanding of the PACE method, you have the students take the lead and come up with as much of the grammar rules as they possibly can. But you do intervene as the teacher, you do redirect them if they are saying stuff that is not true and not figuring out themselves or are missing something important. And even if it's not pure PACE, as someone mentioned, I don't see a problem with, after the students have done some of their own reflection, just telling the students, this is the rule and know this, as long as we don't spend too much time in the lesson on that direct, decontextualized, uncommunicative grammar. And lastly, in the EAR extension phase, the students do a task or a sequence of tasks, meaning focused task that gets them to apply the grammar form in context. And in the instructions of this task, you ideally would not mention the grammar form, but you would strategically craft your instructions to naturally elicit the grammar form, so that the students can use the grammar form that they're hopefully now more conscious about in an authentic communicative context.
I have a question. Today is my first time to hear the term,
Nice.
PACE. So I hope if my question is not thought-provoking enough, so please understand. One teacher shared the story she made with us. So a lot of teachers really love that story. But my question is this one example of PACE method? And also because the teacher made up the story with a certain sentence pattern in it, is this, of course, it's not authentic text, but I mean, can it still be counted?
Yes. In its original form, PACE was used to accompany fabricated or fake comprehensible input texts that were made specifically for language learners, specifically at their level. So while I would say that in an ideal world, we would use an authentic text if we could find one, yes, you can absolutely still do PACE, and the people who came up with PACE would agree that you can absolutely still do PACE with a fabricated comprehensible input text.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or maybe thoughts of, sorry, go ahead.
Hello. Thank you
Hi.
for explaining to me about the PACE. When I see the last question, I have something would like to sharing.
Please.
This is Wendy. I'm work in Myanmar. So right now in Myanmar is the night time. Okay, thank you for Yu Lao Shi to help me to ask the PACE. So can I sharing some can I sharing example to you about my class student, how do we learn apply for PACE?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, actually, I know right now the AI is so popular, but I'm not the person who's so smart for technology. But I used to really create for the classroom. So I give the student, because when I teaching students learning grammar, I used to take the sentence from their story. For example, last time I have the students, they told me someone just broke up no, someone brought up, and then when the students come to the classroom, and the student talk to me and ask me, don't talk to others. So I just keep quiet. After I found my students, they brought up a person, the boy. He looks more he looked more handsome. So I just made a joke with him. I said, hey Georgie, you look really handsome after you cut your hair. And then our cousin just laughing. So I made the sentence, okay, let's say in Chinese. 你别告诉我，你最近变帅了。So I just want to say, using one sentence, please don't tell me, and then I add the story. After I add and then I mean, the student will follow the instruction, my instruction to about the grammar. I didn't really teaching grammar. I just give the word. The first one is, please don't tell me, and then just someone to do something, and then the action plus something chance. So all my students, they do it. After that, right? Of course, I also make some action with them. And the good things I feel because the classroom is grade 8, that's just a beginner classroom. But I think after, if the teacher, if you give them some idea, they can create all the sentence and then become to a point. So I think it's really interesting. I'm so sorry. Because I'm not sure. Do you understand what do I say? Because my English is not so good.
Your English is much, much better than my Chinese, which is
No.
total trash. But I think I've understood what you said. You've described some good strategies for doing contextualized inductive grammar where students figure out the rules rather than being like list of grammar rules, memorize them, do drills.
Also the end, I asked them to create the sentence become to let a poem. And then at night, I also made the music. That's why I said I didn't using the music. The point is, after when the sentence become to a song, and all the students are also really surprised. So after that, because I'm teaching 6 classes, and then all my students right now, they start to make their own music from using the vocabulary word. So
Oh,
I
I
think
love
it's
that. Writing their own songs. That sounds like a lot of fun.
yeah. So maybe that's my sharing, and thank you.
Thank you. I wish I were a fun teacher like that.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any other PACE or PACE adjacent examples to share of how they've used PACE or something similar that likewise teaches grammar inductively in context?
Maybe not the teaching, but also can thinking about the practice, which is recently I'm just going to teach the chapter about food. So like that them use the sequencing words, like to film a cooking show or something to
Oh, that sounds fun.
yeah, which is like you are contextualize your task and then let them apply the structure we have learned and like applied it. So I feel like it's not just the teaching part, not like except the teaching, we also can thinking about practicing like meaningful practice. Even about drill, like if you can make it a meaningful drill. I'm not saying like I feel like drill sometimes is necessary. Again, language sometimes we need a repetition. So drill is type of repetition. But if we can make it more meaningful, like sing the song, right? That could be more attractive and more meaningful for students. So
I agree. When I use the word drill, I'm thinking of an activity that is not meaningful, that's not communicative, that's very robotic. But I wouldn't even say that those activities are dangerous. And they maybe are necessary, or if not strictly necessary, at least helpful from time to time. I think the key is just to not make classes that focus on drills that do not resemble authentic communicative situations. But is it dangerous to do a little conjugation drill? No, as long as it's just not taking away a lot of communication time. And students learn differently, for better or for worse. a lot of students come to me and to my colleagues out of high school, out of very grammar focused classes that do not align with what we do. And they, as a result, think that conjugation and verb drills, grammar drills are what language learning looks like. That's false. But the thing is, they have this idea. So it's almost like we have to do at least a little tiny bit of it, at least in the beginning, to make them think they're learning something, even if they have a very skewed perspective of what language learning is. Like, it's interesting because these are usually kids in relatively low level classes. And I'm thinking, but not saying, at least most days, you wouldn't be in first semester, second semester, maybe not even third semester class if what you did in those 4 years of high school French actually worked. So clearly, that is not language learning because you would be in a higher level if that actually worked. But yeah, drills can have their place as long as they don't become the feature attraction as they do in a lot of less communicative language classes. And the more communicative they are, the better. If we can make the drill have meaning, good. Any other questions, things to share? It looks like we officially have about 4 minutes.
If nobody else is asking questions, can I ask
Go
another
ahead.
question? Okay. I can easily see, if we are teaching higher level students, so we can easily implement whatever you showed previously, starting from the article, showing them a video. But do you teach lower level students? And what
lower
are the
level-
methods do you use? Thank you.
By lower level, do you mean younger students like primary school, or do you mean high
Novice
school or
level.
college students in level 1?
Novice level, like a high
So-
school students.
Okay, so you're talking about the proficiency, not the age of the students.
Correct.
This,
Thank you.
this is perfectly appropriate in a novice basic A1 level class. On the specific topic that I gave my example on, no, that is kind of like a lower intermediate B1 level topic. But you can do this on the appropriate novice A1 level grammar topics. I don't know what that would be in Chinese, but in French, that might be the forms of the present tense, how you conjugate it. It might be reflexive verbs, which are not exactly the same thing, but for the purposes of French 1, a variation on present tense verbs. It might be subject pronouns. It might be adjective noun agreement. So yeah, you can do this exactly, even in the most basic level classes. And even in intermediate and higher level classes, I allow my students and sometimes even encourage them to speak English in the A and C phases, while I do not encourage or most of the time even allow them to speak English during most other parts of the class. So the simple answer is this is very appropriate as long as the topic you're using it for is appropriate in a novice level class.
I think I got it because you just said, yes, you are allowing them to use some English.
Oh yeah,
that's my
even
question.
all
Yes.
English for the grammar parts.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't see, there's no harm to talking about grammar in the target language if the students want to and are able, but I don't see grammar language, grammar lingo as authentic communicative language that students really need to be taught. So that's why I think English is okay, and it's more important that the students understand the grammar than they know how to talk about grammar in the target language. Because when are they going to go to a party and be asked to talk about the rules for a certain tense? I highly doubt that's ever going to happen.
Thank you, CJ. I think there's a teacher that's asking if you're going to be sharing your slides with the
If you
teachers
want
in the
me
future.
to, should I put that in the chat, or would there be a better way for me to share it?
I feel like if you can email it to Crystal, that'll be awesome. I think she will. Crystal will. For all the teachers here, I just want to make it clear that Crystal is going to share, I think, the slides from CJ, and also the video recording that we did today from this session of our webinar.
I'll send the slides to Crystal right now because if I don't, I will definitely forget.
Okay, do we have any other questions? If not, thank you so much, CJ, for your great
Thank you,
talk on
CJ.
grammar teaching today. I feel like we all learned a lot, and we really appreciate your time and sharing of your experience. And I do want to see all the teachers in our future webinars.
Thank you
Okay.
for having me
Thank
and
you.
for
Sure, thank you.
listening to me. Have a
Everyone,
good
Bye.
weekend.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
you too. Bye.
Thank you.
last
Mhm.
weekend.
Thank you too. Let me stop the